Dear reader, everyone wants their life to be comfortable, abundant, free of illness and chaos, and yet we often find that life has its own plans and can leave us feeling like a paper boat spinning around on life's turbulent waters. You may have tried all sorts of popular methods aimed at achieving happiness, but I wonder how effective you found them if they conformed to the traditional worldview. This book introduces many strange and wonderful things. It is all so mind-blowing, you might not want to believe it, but you will not have to believe. The methods introduced here invite you to test everything out for yourself, and when you do, your current worldview will crumble. Transurfing is a powerful technique aimed at giving you the power to create aspects of your life in a way that would ordinarily seem impossible. In particular, transurfing will give you the power to control your own destiny as you see fit. I promise no miracles, and yet something greater than a miracle awaits you. You will discover that hidden quality of reality is more extraordinary than any mystic tradition. There are many books available now on how to become successful, rich, and happy. It is a tempting prospect, for who would not want these things? The problem is that when you start reading these self-help books, you discover that in order for the technique to work, you have to do certain exercises, embark on some serious soul-searching, meditate, and straight away your enthusiasm wanes. For most people, life is busy and stressful enough without having to add to the workload by giving yourself any more to do. The books will tell you that you are imperfect and that change will have to start with yourself, otherwise there is no point in hoping for anything more. You might not be entirely satisfied with yourself, but deep down you know that you do not really want to change, and neither should you have to. Be careful of anyone who tells you that you are less than perfect, for how could anyone else possibly know how you are meant to be? If you are told that you must change yourself in order to achieve the things you want in life, the solution is not where you were looking for it. The main idea of transurfing is based on the existence of the alternative space, which stores the scripts of all possible events. The number of alternatives is infinite, just like the number of possible points on a coordinate graph is infinite. In the alternative space is written everything that was, is, or ever will be. Under certain conditions, a person's thought energy can materialize a given sector of the alternative space. A potential alternative is embodied in physical reality like a reflection in the mirror of alternatives. The individual is capable of shaping their own reality as long as they observe certain rules. The mind tries unsuccessfully to influence the reflection. Instead, you have to change the image that is being reflected. In this book, we are not going to do exercises, meditate, or obsess with the self. Transurfing is not so much a method of self-improvement as a fundamentally different way of thinking and behaving in order to get what you desire out of life. It implies exactly this: to get what you desire from life, rather than having to fight for it. The method of transurfing is not aimed at changing the self. It offers a way of returning to self. We all make mistakes in life and then think how wonderful it would be if we could turn back the clock and put everything right. I'm not promising you a train ticket back to your childhood, but mistakes can be put right, and doing so is a bit like returning to the past or even stepping forward into the past. The meaning of these words will become clearer towards the end of the book. You will not have heard or read anywhere else the things I'm going to tell you here, so be prepared for the unexpected, as enjoyable as it is surprising. Chapter 1. The Alternatives Model. Dreams don't come true. The rustle of the morning stars. I was woken by the neighbor's dog barking. The nasty animal was always waking me up. How I hated it. Why should I have to be woken up by the noise of someone else's pet? I decided to go out for a walk, calm down, and distract myself from the intense desire to set fire to my neighbor's house. They say dogs are like their owners. This one was. There always seemed to be some idiot in my life trying to get me down. Feeling stressed, I started to get dressed. My slippers had disappeared again. Where are you, you sneaky little buggers? When I find you, I will chuck you out. It was foggy and damp outside. I walked along the slippery path through the gloomy forest. Almost all the leaves had fallen, exposing the gray trunks of half-dead trees. Why do I live in the middle of this depressing bog? I reached for a cigarette. I didn't really want one, but old habits told me I needed one. Need? At what point had I become addicted to cigarettes? It's not very pleasant smoking in the morning on an empty stomach. I used to be a social smoker. It had been fashionable, a symbol of freedom and style. But the party ends and the gray drizzle of everyday life sets in, bringing with it problems in patches like slimy puddles. You smoke each problem away several times as if saying to yourself, I'll just have this quick smoke, catch my breath, then launch back into the dreaded routine. Smoke. The smoke got in my eyes, making them sting, so I placed my hands over them for a minute like an upset child. I was so fed up of everything. As if reading my thoughts, a birch branch bent spitefully and hit me hard on the forehead. Bastard. In my outrage, I broke off the branch in half and threw it to one side. The branch got caught in a tree and bounced from side to side and sprang up and down like a jack-in-the-box, as if mocking my inability to change any aspect of my world. Feeling very low, I pushed on. Every time I tried to battle with the world, it would at first yield, giving me false hope, only then to come back at me with a hard slap. It's only in films that the hero sets off toward his goal, casting aside anything and everything that stands in the way. In reality, things are a bit different. Life is like a game of roulette. You win once, twice, even 3 times. You imagine yourself the prize winner with the world at your feet, but always end up with less than you started. You are just the turkey fattened up to be roasted and devoured to the sounds of happy music and laughter. You were fooling yourself. It's not your lucky day. You made a mistake. Wallowing in dark thoughts, I arrived at the beach. Sharp waves were biting viciously at the sandy shore. The cold, damp sea breeze blew at me bitterly. Fat seagulls wandered around the shoreline, lazily pecking at rotten waste. Their eyes carried a cold, black, empty look, as if reflecting the cold and antagonism of the world around me. A tramp was collecting empty bottles on the beach. I wished he would disappear. I wanted to be alone, but he was walking towards me, probably wanting to scrounge something. I decided to go home. Was there no peace anywhere? I was so tired. I realized that the feeling of tiredness never left me, even when I was relaxing. At some point, I had started killing time, as if sitting out at a prison sentence. I was always waiting for things to change, for a new stage in my life to begin, where I would be different and able to enjoy life, but that stage was always somewhere in the future. In the meantime, it was the same old drudgery. I kept waiting, but the better future remained as elusive as ever. I would return home and do the same thing I always did, eat a boring breakfast, and then leave for my dull job, forcing myself to produce results which mattered to someone else, but not to me. It would be just another day of the same tiresome, meaningless life. I was woken by the rustle of the morning stars. What a sad dream. It was as if I had returned to a period in my past. Thank goodness it was only a dream. I stretched with relief, just like my cat does. There he was lying lazily, sprawled out, only his ears giving any sign that he was aware of my presence. Get up, you whiskered thing. Are you coming with me for a walk? I had placed an order for a sunny day, and so set off towards the sea. The path led through the forest, and the rustle of the morning stars gradually faded, giving way to the multi-voiced choir of the bird nation. Someone in the bushes was trying especially hard. Food! Food! There he was, the little wretch. However can such a little ball of fluff squawk so loudly? Only now did it occur to me, although every bird had a different voice, none were ever out of tune with the rest of the choir. They always managed to produce such a graceful symphony. No orchestra, however sophisticated, could be favorably compared. The sun stretched out its rays between the trees, creating a magical backlighting that highlighted the voluminous depth and richness of the colors of the forest and transforming it into one miraculous hologram. The path led me diligently towards the sea. The emerald waves exchanged whisperings with the warm sea breeze. The shore seemed endless and empty, but I felt comfortable and at peace, as if the overpopulated world had created a secluded corner just for me. Some people believe the world is an illusion created by the mind, but I could not imagine having such a high opinion of myself that I could think that all this beauty was the product of my own consciousness. Still feeling the effect of my oppressive dream, I began to reminisce about my former life, which had actually been as dull and gloomy as my dream. Like a lot of people, I had often demanded that the world give me all I felt it owed me, but in response, it had turned its back on me in indifference. I was advised by others wiser and more experienced than myself not to give up, because the world doesn't give up that easily either. You have to fight for what you want. So I tried battling with the world, but I didn't get anywhere and ended up exhausted. My advisors had a ready answer for this too. You are the problem. Change yourself before you start demanding things of life. So I battled with myself, but this turned out to be even harder than battling with the world. Then one day I dreamed that I was in a nature reserve. In the dream, I was surrounded by indescribable beauty. I was walking through the reserve and admiring the full wonder of it all when I came across an angry old man with a gray beard, who, as far as I could make out, was the guardian of the reserve. He watched me in silence. I walked up to him, but as soon as I opened my mouth to speak, he cut across me. In a cold tone, he said that he didn't want to hear a word. He was tired of noisy and capricious visitors who were constantly displeased, always making demands, and left mountains of rubbish after themselves. I nodded in sympathy and walked on. I was amazed by the unique beauty of the reserve and wondered why I hadn't visited it before. Enchanted, I continued to wander around, taking in the magnificence on all sides. No words can fully describe the perfection of the landscape. My mind went blank in stunned admiration. Soon the guardian appeared before me again. The austere look on his face had softened, and he beckoned for me to follow. We climbed to the top of a green hill, and from there the spectacular view of a picturesque valley opened before us. I could make out some kind of village with toy houses decorated with plants and flowers, like an illustration in a book of fairy tales. Had the scene before me appeared more real, I could have stood regarding it with delight for some time. As it was, I started to suspect that such fabulous beauty was the stuff of dreams and not real life. I turned to the guardian with a questioning look, but he just sneered into his beard, as if to say, "We're only just getting started." As we descended into the valley below, it began to dawn on me that I could not remember how I had arrived at the reserve. I was hoping the old man could give me an explanation. Then I must have made some clumsy remark about how it must feel pretty damn good to be one of the lucky ones who could afford to live in such a beautiful place, to which, openly displaying his irritation, the guardian replied, "Who is stopping you from joining them?" I started to go on about how not everyone was born rich, and we don't choose our fate. The guardian ignored my words and said, "That's the point. Everyone is free to choose any destiny they wish. The only freedom we truly have is the freedom of choice. You can choose anything you want." His statement did not at all fit with my philosophy of life, and I made to argue with him, but the guardian would not listen. "Fool," he said, "you have the right to choose, but you don't exercise it. You do not even understand what to choose really means." This is ridiculous, I thought. What does he mean by, "I can choose whatever I want"? Anyone would think that you could just conjure up anything you wanted. At that moment, I suddenly realized that I was dreaming. The situation threw me, and I did not know how to behave. As far as I can recollect, I hinted to the old man that he could choose to speak rubbish whether in a dream or in waking, but there ended the extent of his freedom. My comment did not seem to bother the guardian at all. In fact, he laughed in response, aware of how ridiculous the situation was. What was the point of getting into a debate with a figure from my own dream? I was considering whether it would be better to wake myself up. As if reading my mind, the old man said, "That's enough. We don't have much time. I hadn't expected them to send me a moron like you, but I must carry on with what my mission entails nonetheless." I was going to ask him what his mission was and who they are, but he ignored me, instead giving me a riddle, which at the time seemed quite absurd. Everyone can have the freedom to choose whatever they want, but there's a riddle for you. How do you acquire that freedom? When you guess the answer correctly, your apples will fall to the sky. What apples? I was beginning to lose patience and said that I had no intention of solving any riddles. Miracles only happened in dreams and fairy tales. In reality, apples generally fall to the ground, to which he replied, "That's enough, let's go. There is something I must show you." Regrettably, when I woke up, I could not remember the end of the dream. However, I did have the distinct feeling that although I was unable to express it consciously, the guardian had imparted some kind of information to me. Just one word seeped through into my mind, but I had no idea what it meant. Transurfing. The thought I found going around my mind was that I did not have to totally furnish my world myself, that everything that was to be mine had been created long ago without my participation, but for my own well-being. There was absolutely no point in battling with the world for a place under the sun, and no one was stopping me from simply choosing the life that I wanted to have. At first, the idea seemed absurd. I would probably have forgotten all about it if I had not, to my amazement soon afterwards, started having very clear recollections of what the Guardian meant by the word choose, and how to actually make a choice. The answer to the Guardian's riddle came to me of its own accord. As knowledge does sometimes seem to come from nowhere, every day I learned something new, and each time I felt huge surprises, sometimes bordering on fear. I can give no rational explanation of how this knowledge came to me, but one thing I am certain of. I could never have myself made it up. Ever since I discovered transurfing, or rather, since it was given to me to discover, my life has been filled with joyful meaning. Anyone who has ever been involved in some kind of creative work will know the happiness and fulfillment that comes along with creating something with your own hands. Imagine then the feeling of creating your own destiny. Even the expression, to create your own destiny, as it is interpreted in the usual sense, fails to describe what I mean here. Transurfing is a method that frees you to choose your own destiny, literally like you would choose something in a supermarket. I want to share this with you so that you can understand why apples fall to the sky, why the morning stars rustle, and many other curious things. The Guardian's riddle. There are different interpretations of the nature of fate. One interpretation is that fate is your lot in life, something predetermined and which, however hard you try, you cannot ever escape. This definition is rather limiting, as it suggests that if a rough lot has befallen you in life, there is no hope of anything ever getting any better. Despite this, there will always be those who willingly accept this definition of fate because it is convenient. They would rather life be reliable and the future more or less predictable than live with the fear of uncertainty. Nonetheless, the total inevitability implied by this interpretation of fate leaves one feeling dissatisfied and even a little resentful. People who are deprived of good luck lament their fate and naturally question why life is so unfair. Why is it that some people have more than they could ever desire, while others never seem to have enough? Why is it that things come easily to some, while others never achieve results however hard they try? Some people are endowed with natural beauty, intellect, and strength, while others seem to have inferior goods label stuck to their forehead for their entire life as if paying for some kind of previously committed sin. Why does such inequality exist? Why does life in its endless diversity place limits on certain groups of people, and where exactly did those less lucky go wrong? People often feel hurt and indignant when they realize they are less fortunate than others, and they search for an explanation for their circumstances. This is when many people turn to teachings that support ideas such as karma and retribution for sins committed in previous lives. One would think that all the Lord or our God had to do with his time was discipline his naughty children, and that despite his omnipotence, he evidently struggles with the parenting side of things, putting off the punishment of retribution until a later date. One wonders what the point could be of punishing a person for something they do not actually remember doing. Another popular explanation for inequality spreads the false hope that those who suffer and live their lives in need will later receive generous compensation, although it is not clear whether good fortune awaits them in heaven or in a future life. Whatever the arrangement, explanations like these can never leave one fully satisfied. Whether past and future lives exist or not is also of little significance. You can only be aware of the life you are living now, and in so, it is the only one you have. If you believe that your fate is predetermined, then the best remedy for the despondence you may feel is acceptance. There will always be people around you to give you good advice like, if you want to be happy, just be happy. Be optimistic. Be satisfied with what you have. There will always be someone to tell you that the cause of your unhappiness is your own constant complaining and unrealistic expectations of life, and that you could be happy by definition if you would simply reconnect with your inner worldview. Inner child, I guess. You might half-heartedly agree whilst at the same time awkwardly acknowledging how uninspired you really feel about greeting your dull life with newfound joy. Surely we have the right to expect more. Why should we have to force ourselves to be happy when it is as futile as trying to force yourself to love someone? Then there are the quote-unquote enlightened individuals preaching universal love and forgiveness. Their world is like a blanket of illusion that can pull up over your head to protect yourself from encountering the severity of life head-on, and everything does get a little easier as a result. Deep down, however, it is still difficult to comprehend why you should forgive those you hate and love those you have no genuine feeling for. What good is happiness if it is faked? Surely happiness should come naturally rather than being squeezed from the soul like the last drop of toothpaste from a tube. There are others who refuse to believe that life is boring and primitive enough to be reduced to predetermined fate. This type of person would rather be satisfied with what they have managed to achieve by their own abilities than accept the lot they have been dealt. This is a different perception of fate whereby you make your own luck, and good luck has to be fought for. That is just how it is. Wise people will tell you that life is not given to anyone on a plate, and that if you are not satisfied with what you have, you must dig your heels in and work hard to attain the happiness you want. The history books describe brave heroes who fought and labored day and night, overcoming unimaginable obstacles. The victors were rewarded with the laurels of success, but only after suffering all the burdens and privations of battle. This take on fate is not very logical either. Millions of people battle and labor, but true success comes to but a few. You can spend your entire life struggling desperately for a place under the sun, and yet get nowhere. Why would life be so cruel and unyielding? What a heavy burden it is to have to battle with the world to get what you want, and if the world does not respond, to have to battle with yourself. How hard is it to believe that if you are poor, ill, ugly, or unlucky, it is your own fault, that you are flawed and so you must change? These ideas suggest that you are an accumulation of various shortcomings and defects which must be worked on. Unless you are lucky enough to be born rich and happy, your lot in life is either to humbly bear your own cross or dedicate your entire life to fighting against it. It is somehow not a view of life that ready fills the heart with joy. Surely there is a glimmer of hope among these dismal beliefs. Fortunately, there is a glimmer of hope that comes from a totally different view of things. The solution is as simple as it is enjoyable in contrast to the other views described above. In Transurfing, the concept of fate is based on an alternative model of the universe. Before you wave your hand in disappointment and decide that you are being fed yet another chimera, remember that every known concept of fate originates from a specific worldview, which in turn is based on a number of unproven principles. For example, materialism is founded on the proposition that matter is primary and consciousness is secondary. Idealism claims the opposite. Neither of these philosophies has been proven, and yet models of the universe are constructed around both. Each model is convincing enough and has its own loyal defenders. Both materialism and idealism explain the phenomenon of the world via philosophy, science, and religion, and both are right and both are wrong in their own ways. Man will never be able to describe absolute truth with total accuracy because the notions used in our attempts to describe the truth are of themselves relative. There is a well-known parable about 3 blind men who describe an elephant by studying it with their hands. The first blind man touches the elephant's trunk, the second touches the leg, and the third touches the ear. Each draws conclusions about what kind of animal the elephant represents based on their own findings. It would be pointless to try and prove that only one description of the 3 is correct. What is important is that the description be relevant and applicable. You have no doubt heard the idea expressed that reality is an illusion created by the mind, but no one has explained in detail where the illusion comes from. Does it mean that we are all, in a sense, watching a film? Of course, it is highly unlikely that a concrete, rational substantiation of this idea will ever be upheld. Others hold the opposite opinion that the material world is simply a mechanism which functions according to its own immutable laws and cannot be governed by human consciousness. There is surely an irrefutable grain of truth in this idea. The human mind likes to have its feet on solid ground, free of ambiguity, and so for centuries scholars have been tearing one theory to pieces in favor of another, which is then placed high on a pedestal. After every fight on the intellectual battlefield for truth, just one fact remains undefeated. Every theory represents a separate aspect of the phenomenon of a multifaceted reality. Each theory that stands the test of time has its place, for they all represent one aspect of reality. If you decide that fate is something predestined that you cannot personally change, then this is how it will be. In effect, you are voluntarily giving yourself to the will of others, becoming like a small boat floating at the mercy of the waves. If, however, you decide that you can create your own destiny, then you will consciously take responsibility for everything that happens in your life, battling against the waves in an attempt to sail your little boat. You may have noticed that whatever you choose is always manifested. What you choose is what you get. Whatever worldview you choose to believe in, the truth of that worldview will always be on your side, and others will argue with you because they too are right. Any aspect of reality can be taken as a starting point and subsequently developed into a whole field of knowledge, and it will have logical consistency and successfully reflect one manifestation of reality. An entire field of knowledge can be substantiated by just one fact, which, although not fully understood, has its place. For example, quantum physics is based on a number of unproven truths and postulates which cannot be proven because they serve as the basic starting point for a given field of knowledge. In quantum physics, a microcosm sometimes acts as a particle and sometimes as a wave. Unable to provide an unambiguous explanation for such dualism, scientists took the phenomenon to be an axiom. The postulates of quantum physics bring together different aspects of reality in all its diversity of form, just like the blind men in the parable in one case proclaimed that the elephant functions like a stump, and in another, like a snake. If in describing the microcosm one chooses to start with its particle quality as fundamental, then one arrives at the model of the atom created by the famous physicist Niels Bohr. In the Bohr model, the electrons rotate around the nucleus like in the planets in the solar system. If, on the other hand, one takes the main quality to be the wave, then the model of the atom will look like a blurry dot. Both models work reflecting different manifestations of reality. In this case, too, one could say that the scientists get what they choose. Any manifestation of reality can serve as a postulate, or the basis for an argument which will undoubtedly make sense and have its place. In search of truth, people have always striven to understand the nature of the world, studying its individual parts. Bodies of scientific knowledge were created to describe and explain the various phenomena of nature, and often they contradict each other. The nature of the world is one, but it reveals itself to us in many guises. As soon as one face has been studied and explained, another appears that does not fully correspond to the first. Scientists have attempted to overcome these contradictions by encompassing the diverse manifestations of reality in a single model of the universe, but this is no easy task. There is one irrefutable fact that unites and reconciles all branches of knowledge, and that is the diverse and multifaceted nature of reality. Variability is the world's most fundamental quality. For some reason, the defenders of different fields of knowledge disregard this fact in their attempts to describe individual phenomenon, despite the fact that there is so much that could be learned from it. Variability is a key reference point, just like 0 is the main reference point for a coordinate grid. Any starting point for a particular area of knowledge is secondary in relation to this key reference point of variability, and yet it is bypassed as if it held no information. Nonetheless, it does carry information, and information of quite an extraordinary nature. To solve the Guardian's riddle, we will take the quality of variability as a starting point. In other words, we will take a postulate, the fact that reality manifests itself in an infinite variety of forms. Despite the very general nature of this postulate, it reveals quite fascinating knowledge. We start with the idea that all diverse manifestations of reality originate in a common source. The world manifests itself as movement of matter through time and space, and this movement is subject to certain laws. As you know, points are plotted on a graph in accordance with mathematical formula. You could say that the function which determines how points are plotted on a graph is also a law. So where are the laws of the universe written? Formula-like laws are but an abstract product of the human mind created for the convenience of expressing concepts. It is highly unlikely that the laws of nature are recorded anywhere. Could a graph be created that marked the position of all points of matter? Of course, one could theoretically mark the coordinates of the infinite number of all existing points in the universe, but the capacity of the human memory is too limited to cope with such a massive volume of data. Nature, on the other hand, has no difficulty with eternity. Nature has no need of a formula to generalize the position and movement of points on a graph. If the graph line were to be broken up into infinitely small points, then every point could be seen as a cause and the next point as the consequent effect, whereby any movement of a point of matter through time and space could be perceived as an infinite chain of infinitesimal examples of cause and effect. In science, we describe the movement of matter in terms of laws, but in nature, this movement exists in its natural form as the infinite flow of cause and effect. Generally speaking, information concerning all possible points along the path of moving matter is stored in an information field, which we refer to here as the alternative space. The field contains information about everything that ever has been, is, and ever will be. The alternative space is a material information structure. It is an infinite field containing information on all possible scenarios of any event that could ever possibly take place. One could say that the alternative space contains absolutely everything. We can hardly guess the form this information takes, and yet our purpose here does not require us to know this. The important thing is to establish that the alternative space serves as a template or coordinate grid for the movement of all matter in time and space. Every point in space contains its own version of a given event. For the ease of understanding, let us say that each variation or version has a script and scenery. The scenery is the external form of a phenomenon, whereas the script is the path that matter moves along. For the sake of convenience, the alternative space can be said to have different sectors. The greater the distance between the sectors, the more the script and scenery will differ. A person's destiny also has numerous alternatives. Theoretically speaking, there are no limits to the scripts and sceneries of human existence because the alternative space is infinite. Any seemingly insignificant event can affect a twist of fate. A person's life, just like any other movement of matter, represents a chain of cause and effect events. In the alternative space, the effect is always located in close proximity to its cause. One follows the other, and so the sectors of a person's destiny create a lifeline. The scripts and settings of the sectors on one line are more or less uniform. A person's life flows evenly in one direction, until such time as an event occurs that changes the scripts and sceneries. When this happens, destiny takes a turn and shifts to another lifeline. Experiencing lifelines placed very close together is like watching a play and then the next day going to the theater again to see the same play, but this time the stage scenery is different. If during the next theater season you saw the play with the same actors, but there had been a significant change to the script, this would be like experiencing a lifeline situated slightly further away in the alternative space. Finally, if you watch the same production in a different theater, you would see a totally different interpretation of the play, and this would be like experiencing a lifeline that exists a significant distance from the first. Reality has such diversity of form because the number of alternatives for its manifestation is limitless. Any starting point for one or another form of manifestation results in a chain of cause and effect relationships. One could say that reality unfolds through life depending on the selection of the original reference point, and so ultimately, everyone gets what they choose. You have the right to choose precisely because an eternal number of alternatives already exist. No one is preventing you from choosing the destiny you would feel comfortable having. Managing your own destiny comes down to one single thing: making the choice. Transurfing shows you how to make that choice. So an information structure exists that contains an infinite number of potential alternatives, each with its own unique script and scenery. The process of transformation into physical reality corresponds to that laid down in the information structure. How matter moves through the alternative space can be demonstrated by the following metaphor. Imagine a water pipe with a cooling ring that moves slowly along the pipe, causing the water inside it to freeze. The effect of the cooling ring makes it look as if a crystal of ice is moving through the water. Water molecules tend to remain in roughly the same place in a relatively free state. At the moment that the cooling ring passes through a given sector of water, the molecules inside the ring are solidified into a frozen crystal. As the ring moves further down the pipe, the frozen water in the area behind the ring melts again, and the molecules are once again freed up. It is not the crystal itself that moves. In other words, it is not a single chunk of ice that floats through the water, but the potential to create the structure of ice, i.e., the frozen state. The water in the pipe serves as an analogy for the alternative space, and the crystal of ice as an analogy for the material manifestation of a particular alternative. The water molecules are like people, and their position to the crystal structure is like a manifestation in physical reality of one possible fate. There is no single answer to the question of what the cooling ring symbolizes. In other words, how and why the information structure transforms into physical matter, no one can say. In a microcosm, matter can behave as a bundle of energy. We know that in a vacuum, for example, microparticles undergo a continual process of birth and annihilation, suggesting that matter is present and yet does not represent a physical substance. The one thing that is clear is that the things we can touch have an intangible energetic foundation to them. I hope I have not overwhelmed the reader with too much physics, particularly as we are just at the very beginning of transurfing. The things you learn in this book may come as a bit of a surprise, so naturally, I offer some theoretical substantiation just to help the mind keep a firm footing. Do be patient. The wave is another analogy for the process of physical manifestation in which the sea is the alternative space, and the wave the material manifestation of a given alternative. Take a wave that forms in the sea after an earthquake. It looks like the wave moves across the surface of the sea in a hump, but in fact, the water remains in one place. It is not a mass of water that is moving across the sea, so much as the energetic potential for transformation into physical reality. It is only when the accumulation of water finally reaches the shore that it breaks on the ground. Any other wave behaves in the same manner. Does this mean that material manifestation moves through time and space while the potential alternatives remain in one place for eternity in the space of everything that was, is, and will be? Why not? Time of itself is as static as space. The passing of time is only felt when it turns like film footage, one shot following another. If you unroll the film and look at all the frames put together, there is no time because all the frames exist simultaneously. Time is static until we start looking at each frame in sequence. It is the same in life, which is why the idea that everything comes and goes is so deeply rooted in our minds. Everything that is recorded in the field of information has always been there and will always be there. Lifelines exist like a reel of film. Things that have happened in the past do not just disappear, and what has yet to be in the future is already present here in the now. The current section of a person's life is a material manifestation of the alternative space in this section of their lifeline. This idea might be slightly perturbing, and you might be asking yourself how it is possible for countless alternatives of your own fate to exist simultaneously in stasis. Who is responsible for this? God or the laws of nature, perhaps? Imagine a point on a coordinate grid. In school, we are taught that any point on the grid can have any x and y coordinate from minus to plus infinity, and yet it does not occur to anyone to ask why a point can have absolutely any coordinate. Imagine if the point that moves along the function line were surprised and asked, how can this be that the path I have traveled so far has always existed and always will, and how can it be that the path I'm about to travel has already been outlined in advance? It would seem strange to the point, but not to you, because you are observing its path from above and able to see things from a different perspective. The alternative space serves as a template that determines how physical reality can show itself. Imagine a person walking through a dark forest with a torch. In the dark, the person holding the torch lights up a small area around themselves. The entire forest is like the alternative space, while the area which is lit up is like the physical manifestation of the alternative in that area. The question remains as to what provides the light. In other words, what ignites, i.e. materializes, a particular alternative within the template. To answer this question, we need to take a different starting point. Nowadays, most people agree that thoughts are material. There is also evidence that reality takes two forms. On the one hand, material existence defines consciousness, and on the other hand, there is clear evidence to the contrary, indicating that consciousness also defines physical existence. Therefore, thoughts not only provide the motivation for human action, they also have a direct influence on our reality. For example, our worst expectations generally tend to come true. Of course, one could argue that this is not because our thoughts were materialized, but rather that our thoughts were a premonition of impending misfortune that would have occurred anyway. There is undoubtedly much that is unclear and ambiguous about paranormal phenomena. However, that does not mean that one should ignore or negate the relationship between thought and the process of material realization. Much evidence exists to indicate the direct impact of thought on reality. One way or another, individual consciousness shapes a person's destiny. This book focuses specifically on how this is possible. Thought energy transforms possible alternatives into physical reality. This statement is correct because reality can be manifested in any form defined by consciousness. Evidence of this hypothesis can be found not only in everyday life, but also in the experiments of quantum physics. For our purposes, the specific mechanism by which thought energy interacts with this alternative space is of no great consequence. It is not yet clear by what means the transfer of information takes place, whether on an energetic level or by some other means. For convenience sake, we will simply work with the idea that thought energy lights up a certain sector of the alternative space, as a result of which one alternative is transformed into physical reality. Waves of thought energy find the sector in the alternative space that corresponds in quality. The alternative of that sector is then made manifest on the physical level, marking the process of how consciousness creates reality. You should bear in mind that this is only one way of manifesting reality. Generally speaking, it is not possible to create the reality you desire simply by sitting in one place and contemplating it. Although people do exist who are capable of materializing objects literally out of air, they are very few in number and as a rule do not advertise their abilities. Nonetheless, thoughts have as much impact on a person's destiny as concrete actions do. People are used to the idea that there is a visible and clearly comprehensible connection between their actions and the consequences of them. By contrast, the impact of one's thoughts manifests imperceptibly and so appears inexplicable and unpredictable. It might seem difficult to determine a causal relationship between one's thoughts and subsequent events, but soon you will see that the connection is quite direct. A person gets what they choose. Some may conclude that I seem to be saying that the seas, mountains, planets, and the galaxy are all just a product of their personal thought energy. This is because people have a tendency to consider themselves the center of the universe, whereas in an actual fact, they are just a tiny dot in infinite space. The world is inhabited by millions of living organisms, and every single one of them contributes to the creation of reality. Every living being has its own characteristic thought energy. If you are not comfortable viewing plants as capable of thought, then you can refer to the process differently. It does not change the nature of the phenomenon. Nobody can say with certainty that inert objects do not have a quality similar to the thought energy emanated by living beings, to say nothing of the one spirit permeating all things, which we call God. Every being has consciousness and forms the layer which makes its own world. One could say that everything in this world carries a particle of God, and this is how he governs the whole world. We all live in the same world, and yet every individual moves along their own lifeline. The qualities of the material world are the same for everybody. It is just that its concrete realization is unique within the context of a person's life. For example, imagine that you are a tourist walking around a beautiful city. You admire the sights and the architecture. You take in the flower beds, the fountains, the park avenues, and the smiling faces of the city's prosperous inhabitants. Then as you pass by a rubbish bin, you see a homeless person. He is in the same city as you, in the same dimension, but he does not see what you see. He sees an empty bottle in the bin, a dirty wall, his competitor who wanted the bottle too, and a policeman eyeing him with suspicion. You live on one lifeline and the homeless man on another. Your lifelines intersected at a point in the alternative space, bringing you together into the same world in the dimension of physical reality. All manifestation of a material nature has an energetic foundation. The energy field is primary and all physical manifestation is secondary. Scientists attempt to unite different manifestations of energy within the context of a single theory, and soon they will achieve good results. However, they will find that they have to keep adding many more things to the theory because reality takes on an infinite number of forms. Without going into too much detail, we will take energy to be an abstract force which is invisible but nonetheless exists. For our purposes, it is enough to accept the fact that the energy of human thought is material. Thought energy does not just spin round inside a person's head. It flows out into the space beyond the head and interacts with the wider energy field around us. Few would dispute this fact now. For convenience sake, we can talk about the parameter of thought energy that is frequency, just as radio waves have a frequency. Whenever you think about something in particular, the frequency of your thoughts becomes attuned to a certain area within the alternative space. When the thought energy reaches the relevant sector in the alternative space, the potential reality held within that sector begins to materialize. Energy has a highly complex structure and permeates everything that exists in the world. When energy passes through the human body, it is modified by that person's thoughts. By the time it exits the body, it has acquired the same parameters as the thoughts. A radio transmitter works in the same way. Energy absorbs the characteristics of the thoughts of one's mind. When energy exits the human body, it radiates outwards in a thought wave that in turn transforms the sector of the alternative space into physical reality. Whenever you think about something, be it negative or positive, you are radiating thought energy in the alternative space. Modified energy accumulates in a specific sector of the field, and this has the effect of introducing corresponding changes into your life. The circumstances of a person's life are not only created by their actions, but also by the nature of their thoughts. If a person has a hostile attitude toward the world, they will find the world responds to them with the same. If a person constantly expresses dissatisfaction, they will find more and more reasons to be dissatisfied. If a person's attitude to life is predominantly negative, the world will show them the worst side of its nature. Conversely, having a positive attitude is the most natural way to change your life for the better. People get what they choose. Like it or not, that is how life works. Whilst your thoughts are pretty much homogeneous, you will stay on the same lifeline. As soon as your relationship to reality changes in any way, the parameters of thought energy take on new characteristics and the material manifestation of the layer of your world shifts to another line. On this new line, events unfold according to a different script in accordance with the parameters of thought. If for some reason you dislike the new script, you will struggle to change the situation. People tend to react negatively when they come up against obstacles, expressing their dissatisfaction or falling into despair. As a result, the thought energy they radiate refocuses to a line on which the number of obstacles is even greater, making it seem as if their life is a slippery slope. It might seem as if this process cannot be controlled, but in fact, the individual is in control, and it is their own thoughts that they are directing the path of materialization into problematic areas of the alternative space. People think that obstacles can be overcome by action, but in actual fact, they ultimately experience whatever their dominant thoughts are. So if you choose to battle against the obstacles on your path, you will experience an abundance of obstacles. If you are absorbed by thoughts about your own problems, you will find that there are always problems in your life. Even if you take action to change the situation on your current lifeline on the material level, it will not change the original script in the alternative space. All you can effectively do is choose a different script. By trying to change parts of the script you do not like, you inevitably get caught up thinking about what you do not like. Your thoughts are then successfully realized, and you end up getting what you do not want. You cannot change anything about the current lifeline, just as in an art gallery, you cannot take away or reconstruct exhibitions that are not to your taste, as you are not the owner. However, no one is to stop you from turning around and walking into the next room to look at something you can appreciate more. Of course, the shift to a lifeline in which everyone else gets what they want on demand does not happen simply by wishing for it. Not all thoughts can be realized, and not all desires are fulfilled. The reason for this is not the content of a person's thought so much as it is their quality. A dream or wish does not qualify as a choice. Dreams do not come true. To create the reality you want, you have to observe certain conditions, which you will read about later in this book. The alternative space contains an infinite number of possible lifelines for every individual. No one should feel hard done if they do not like their fate, because everyone has the right to choose. The problem is that we do not know how to choose. The world has such diversity of form, one would think it was created to satisfy any need. Everyone can find whatever their heart desires. Even in the academic world, life manifests the side of it we wish to see. For example, idealism holds that the world is an illusion, and life agrees. Materialism says the opposite, and then again, the world has nothing against that. People argue with each other, trying to force others to accept their relationship to the world, and yet the world shows that they are all right. Is that not wonderful? The alternative space is the so-called illusion, and material realization is what is meant by physical reality. We always get what we choose. Those who are familiar with the principles of Islam will understand what is meant by a person's fate is written in the book. This means that fate is preordained and therefore cannot be changed or avoided. Similar statements can be found in other religions. In a sense, a person's destiny is indeed already preordained. The error of religion is in teaching that there is just one version of a person's fate, when in fact there are endless alternatives. They say you cannot avoid your own fate, and to some extent this is true because it is impossible to change the script with any given alternative of it. To battle with the world around you in the hope of changing your fate is a difficult and thankless task. It is not worth trying to change the script. It is far more effective to choose a different alternative, more to your liking. This is all quite strange, and you may quite reasonably have your doubts. I do not expect anyone to accept the alternatives model just like that. I did not believe in it myself until I became convinced that it actually works, and flawlessly at that. It makes no sense to give preference to one model of the universe over another, just for the sake of some absolute truth. It is not the model itself that has meaning so much as what it can help you to achieve. Different mathematical models can illustrate the same physical phenomenon in different ways. It would be hilarious if specialists in analytical geometry suddenly took up arms against mathematical analysts and tried to prove that geometry is the only true mathematical discipline. Mathematicians have been able to agree among themselves, but philosophers and religious leaders have not. It is difficult to say where the alternative space actually is. From the point of view of our three-dimensional reality, one could say that it is everywhere and nowhere. Imagine an endless surface without beginning and without end, inhabited by two-dimensional people. These people would not suspect that the third dimension exists. They would believe that the surface that they live on is the only world that exists, and could not imagine that anything else existed beyond it. We know, though, that a third dimension should be added to this model, and that an infinite number of similar surfaces could be created. So there is no need to be concerned if you cannot visualize an infinite number of parallel worlds aside from our own. It is just a matter of perspective. It is hard to believe in the existence of parallel worlds. Having said that, how easy is it to believe in the theory of relativity, which claims that an accelerating body increases its mass, reduces its size, and slows down the time through which it moves? It is impossible to test the theory firsthand, but that does not matter. It does not matter whether we understand a theory. What matters is the practical benefit that can be derived from it. In the context of infinite space, it is ridiculous and even petty to argue about the advantages of one model over another. Try to imagine the infinite in terms of increasing distance that never reaches a horizon. Oddly enough, infinity in terms of decreasing distance has no limit either. We can only observe a limited portion of the visible universe, for telescopes and microscopes have their limits too. Nonetheless, infinity in the context of the microcosm is no different from infinity in terms of the macrocosm. There is a theory that the visible universe emerged as a result of the Big Bang. According to the theory, the universe has been constantly expanding ever since. Celestial bodies move through the cosmos with phenomenal speed, but when we take into account the huge distances involved, it seems as if the expansion of the universe is taking place incredibly slowly. It is also a well-established fact that in a vacuum, at any given moment in time, elementary particles are born out of nowhere and then immediately disappear. We do not yet know the exact structure of elementary particles, but given the relativity of time and space, there is nothing to stop us perceiving each particle as if it were a separate universe like our own. Physicists claim that they can appear either in the form of waves or in the form of particles. The further one goes into the microcosm, the more relative distances appear huge, and for the internal observer, time slows down. To an external observer, our universe might appear to last for just one brief moment, like a particle birthed and extinguished in a vacuum, whereas we, its natural observers, perceive the universe to have been in existence for billions of years. The next time you take a mouthful of coffee, ask yourself how many universes you have just swallowed. Infinity cannot be divided into parts, and so if you think about it, every time you swallow a mouthful of coffee, you are swallowing an infinite number of universes. Flying through a microcosm takes as long and seems as far as it does flying through the boundless expanse of outer space. Time, like space, goes on for infinity, whether you look backwards or forwards. Intervals of time can be as infinitely large as they can be infinitely small. Any point within a time interval can be seen as a reference point, both sides of which extend into the infinity of time. Changing the reference point to another place within the time interval does not change the extent of infinity in either direction. The infinity of worlds within worlds exists simultaneously. The center of the universe is at the same time to be found in every point in matter, because every point is surrounded by infinity on all sides. All events exist concurrently for the same reason that the center of the universe is located in every point at the same time. This is difficult to imagine, but so is it impossible to grasp infinity in one moment of contemplation. Even more convoluted theories have been designed which claim that the visible universe becomes a finite sphere in fourth-dimensional space. But that does not help particularly because, theoretically speaking, an infinite number of dimensions could exist. Unable to clearly imagine all of this, we have to content ourselves with a narrower perspective and at least pretend that we understand something of these theories. There are many things about contemporary science that are impossible to explain or comprehend. However, this should not prevent us from benefiting from the fruits of scientific thinking. Applying the principles of transurfing can lead to stunning results. The important thing is to decide from the very beginning not to torture yourself with the questions of why and how exactly it all works, which would be as productive as a child asking a physicist why different bodies attract. The scientist would reply, because of the law of gravity. Then the child then follows the next question. How does the law of gravity work? Why do bodies attract? There is no answer to this question, so we will leave the thankless task of trying to explain these things, for it is not ours to know and understand everything. We will simply enjoy the results of the alternatives model. From the alternatives model, it follows that man can create his own destiny. In transurfing, the concept of fate differs from other more widely accepted interpretations. The difference is that, in the context of transurfing, a person can choose their happiness. They do not have to fight for it. There is no need to accept or reject the alternatives model straight away. First, ask yourself this question. Have you achieved much by battling with the world to find happiness? Each person will decide for themselves whether they wish to carry on in the same vein or whether they would prefer to try using a different method. A person can spend their entire life battling without achieving anything at all. Would it not be simpler to act in a way that encouraged life to meet you halfway? For all life does is help manifest your personal choice. Whatever you order, your choice is always granted unconditionally. Choice, however, is different from desire. Wishes are only granted in fairy tales, and most people just keep on wishing. It is no wonder that the belief is so ingrained in our minds that wishes are very difficult, if not impossible to fulfill. We have already taken the first small step towards solving the Guardian's riddle. Soon you will find out why wishes are not granted and dreams do not come true. Summary. Reality is manifest in an infinite variety of forms. Variability is the world's most fundamental quality. Any model of the universe represents just one manifestation of reality. Any branch of knowledge bases itself on one chosen aspect of the manifestation of reality. Your choice is always realized. You always receive what you choose. The alternative space is an information field recording all that was, is, and ever will be. The information field contains potential alternative scenarios to any event. Each alternative has a script and scenery. Space can be divided into sectors, and each sector contains an alternative scenario of an event. The greater the distance between sectors, the more the alternatives will differ. Sectors with roughly uniform parameters are arranged in a lifeline. Material realization moves through space like a bundle of density. The radiation of thought energy materializes as an alternative. Every organism contributes to the creation of material realization. When the parameters of thought energy change, a shift occurs to a different lifeline. You cannot change the fact that scenery exists, but you can choose a different type of scenery. You do not have to fight for happiness. You simply have to choose an alternative reality that is more to your liking.